with the emergence of economic recession in Europe, we see that there's a slight rememorization of what had happened before the Second World War. We see that there's a higher expectation and higher demand for powerful leadership in economically recessing economies. For example, if you look at states like Greece, you see the emergence of Golden Dawn Party that appeal to populist demand through the far-right and Nazis appeal. You see cases in those regions, and you see that there's a propensity of the resurgence of Nazism. We believe that in order to stop the resurgence of such a kind of political movement, it is necessary for us at this time to erase the memory and erase the ideology that have been established before the Second World War. We believe that in this case, there will be less, there's less likely to occur. And with a trend of Western liberal democratic values, ensure that the resurgence and the rematurization of these ideology is not going to be possible. So in my case, I'm going to first elaborate on what makes sure that there would be a resurgence of political movement. And secondly, I'm going to talk about why Nazism itself is harmful and dangerous. Now the first idea, the resurgence of a political movement. What does that entail? Firstly, it entails the re-establishment of infrastructure, things like committees, things like camps, things like how do you mobilize your troops, or even details like uniforms, things like that. Secondly, also entails a mature ideology to mobilize people's ideas. That the entire system, the entire theory of Nazism, the racism that entails, the centralization that this ideology incorporates. Thirdly, it also entails the hope, the faith, the belief that these things will actually actualize in our daily life. That these things are actually going to become the reality. That you can actually capture people without proper trial and camp that into camps and do the most horrible atrocities without international condemnation. But these are the hope and faith and belief, and these are the things that can only be existing with already successful stories. We believe that in order to ensure that there wouldn't be such a resurgence, an erasing of memories that related to these things will be an effective measure to stop the resurgence. But it's by erasing the memory of Nazism, we first of all ensure that it's harder for them to replicate infrastructure before the Second World War. It will be harder for them to quickly mobilize people, harder to establish those committees. And second of all, most importantly, ensure that it will take a long time for them to re-establish the entire ideology, entire theory of Nazism. And because of the fact of the current trend of Western democratic values, that development is going to be harder. And third of all, and most importantly, it will ensure that people would not have the idea that this is going to be successful, because they do not have a success story to talk about. If Golden Dawn Party want to take control of Greece, they might talk about, for example, that this is actually going to happen. This is actually possible to happen. If you look at a case before Second World War, you can actually do that. And people are going to believe that this is going to be true. And at the time when they demand further and powerful leadership, this is going to be dangerous. So that's the reason why we believe that this is also going to be an effective measure to stop the resurgence of Nazism. Yes.
Could you please explain me how the example of the Second World War and the fall of Nazism could be the example of success?
Because before that, without such a memory, you would not have the idea that you can impose racism, that you can impose centralism in a nation and done the atrocities in those scenarios. It would be hilarious that you can actually put people into gas chambers and kill them in camps in the status quo. If you talk about that, for example, if I talk about that to Xinyue, that if I am a powerful leader, I can gas people in a chamber, she will mock at me and saying that that's not going to be true because of the current trend of Western liberal values. But I can tell her that that actually happened and no one stopped that before Second World War. That is actually something possible. And because of that possibility and because of the benefit of central leadership, I claim that I can actually do that. I can actually appeal to the populist demand and actually gain leadership in states with economic recession and ensure that my triumph will be there. Now the second idea of the ideology of Nazism. The ideology of Nazism is based upon, first of all, racism, and second of all, the destruction of a legal system, the deconstitutionalization of a country. We believe that these ideologies in the South are also harmful to a country. These ideas, even if it wasn't labeled as Nazism, when people are looking at those ideas, they can pick theory, they can pick the logic, and they can pick the theory within those books. That's the reason why Hitler's books was forbidden to be published in Germany. Because simply by reading the memoir, simply by reading the ideology and theory of Hitler is already harmful and already dangerous. And we believe that at this time of economic recession, it is more important, it's also important for us to further erase the entire memory, the entire ideology of Nazism, to ensure that there wouldn't be one day a future Hitler who also are going to read about his memoirs and bring those atrocities back. That's the reason why we're proud to propose.
I think the Prime Minister has a speech and they call upon the leader of the opposition to oppose the matter.
Yeah, I would like to ask him to do my speech.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a tradition that people learn from histories. Even politicians, they even love more to take a reference from the history when they're meeting trouble, when they're having problem in the practical life. That's why my partner clearly told you, in the current world, recession are happening in some parts of the world. And that's why when the leaders of those countries, when they want to look back and learn some lessons from the past, that's how when they lose faith towards the current world, that's when they lose faith towards the economy, when they take reference, and we look at how successful Hitler managed to go out of the recession by publicizing, by promoting the idea of the extreme nationalities. We think it's really dangerous for the extreme nationalities to make use of this by taking that reference. We think in this case, to prevent further harm, to prevent people taking that reference, to prevent people taking reference from the whole set of systems of telling you how to do to promote economy in that way, we think it's really important that we should erase it now. But before I continue my case, I'm going to bring you several rebuttals to the previous speaker. So just now, the first speaker told us that so basically there's nothing good from Hitler's theory. So basically they kill people and basically they did nothing good at all. But ladies and gentlemen, think about it. Why Hitler at that time becomes so convincing to people? If there is really nothing convincing in his history, why the whole country turned crazy for him? So we think that there's something really special in Hitler's theory, that even though all of us we know that Hitler's really evil, but we have to admit that he's a great speaker. He's really great in terms of delivering his logic of convincing people to know accept some really extreme ideas. Well, it can happen that Hitler might be a really great debater, but but the dangerous thing is that he's debating some really dangerous material and make it really convincing. That's why we think that even though most people, they may not really have read of that theory, and so under our current education, you might believe that this is really dangerous, there's nothing good in it. But we cannot guarantee that some people from those states which are currently in session, like people from Greece, the whole country is under the bankruptcy. When they under a really different situation from us, who live in a peace and a peaceful environment. So I think under that situation, it's very easy for them to learn from this, and after they read this, it makes it very easy to be convinced by Hitler and take reference for that. That's why I think that the scenario portrayed by my partner is very likely to happen. And then they talk about how it's going to have an impact on international relations. They asked how can you later on have a reason to, let's say, deal with Middle East. But ladies and gentlemen, think about that. Why there are so many problems with the Middle East? We think a lot of the root of a lot of problems there is just because that part of history. Because people hate each other from that history. Because Jews, they don't believe that they deserve to be killed. And even if they're now living peacefully, but they still deeply inside hold that concept that they were once bullied by the mankind. That's why I think that by erasing the problem from the root can actually even lessen the conflict from the Middle East. That's why I think that we are even better the scenario in the arena of international relations. No, but apart from that, what I'm going to bring as an extension is that is that we believe that there are basically two theories coming from two core issues coming from the Nazi theories. First is that it thinks of it praises the dictatorship and worship towards individual. That is what my partner has portrayed to you. But moreover, we believe that there's also an important core context from that theory is that they believe people are born to be unequal. They believe that some races are born to be unequal to others. For example, in that book, they portray how Jews are really disadvantaged, how Jews are born to be less advantaged than other people. And we are going to prove to you that how this idea, even if within education, is still deeply rooted within some racist identity, and therefore causing harm, and therefore stay in the way of we achieving equality between different races. So let's say that in the current stage, the whole world is trying to deal with this problem of inequality between races. But still, there are problems. Staying on the way that Jews are feeling. Jews deep inside, they're still feeling this hostility towards the world. That world are criticizing that Jews are owning the world, and there are still problems between in the discrimination towards African Black people and Latin American people. We think that, and we think that the theory coming from the Nazi can be a source of their insecurity. That whenever they feel the discrimination, they can feel that in some part of human history, there are some people who are deemed discriminated by others, who are suffering with a massacre, and therefore that is the outcome. We think that not only for Jewish people, even for African Americans, when they think about it, when they learn from the history book that there are some people who are treated like that, but think about their current position. The current position are really similar to what Jews are like in that age. So they're very likely to take that, to feel really insecure because their current position. So that's why we think that it's going to be really harmful, and moreover, it enhances white people's image of bullying others, of carrying the superiority towards other races. We think this is also very harm. We think in the current state, also a lot of white people, they were trying really hard to prove that we don't discriminate you, that we are trying our best to carry out a lot of affirmative action towards you. But still, people from the minority races just don't approve it. We think that it is because they have a history. They play a historic role of bullying others. That's why we think by erasing this memory, it will lessen people's impression towards West people. People who are white are out in the history have always been carrying the role of killing others and bullying others. We think that's going to be really helpful on our way to promote equality among races. So So look at the German. Look at the day. We're trying to solve basically two problems. First, we want to prevent states who are in a recession turn to become dictatorship. And second, we want to promote equality between races. So we think that under our scenario, we are providing a better model of society to you. So we're proud to propose. Thank you.
I think with that, the Prime Minister and the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to continue the case for the opposition.
It's very important in educational purposes for every person in our today's world to get known about all these issues which proposition mentioned. So, secondly, I will explain to you why the Nazism example is very important to have proper political debates now in our debate society, and debates about the democracy and means where democracy should be restricted and other stuff. And certainly, why the only way to produce some emphatic feelings for people from rich countries where Nazism will be never again to the people in poor countries where Nazism actually is now. Sometimes it makes us donate money for these reasons and why it's very important. So first of all, we believe that Nazism, not only the Second World War, not only Holocaust, and the example of Germany is very important here. It's not a second proposal that is so bad that it can happen only in Germany. No, the problem, the beneficial thing here is that Germany was a pretty successful country, and it's also very good for us to see that even in very successful countries, it's very easy to commit such kind of atrocities which were committed. And it's not only bad things that they put it in a very big bucket. It's a long story how the democratically elected leader could really commit some really crucial things. And what is important? Because now really we in our world also have debates and how much we can, how much the leader who was elected can do with the society, and what the society can do with the democracy. Could it restrict other rights? And we can see as example of Hungary, where Viktor Orban can do such kind of stuff. And because we have this very good, very good example, which can easily be told, to the children, to other stuff in the school, because you should have such kind of good and simple example for people to get known about it. As we have Christian morality to get known that stealing is wrong, killing is wrong. For this reason, we also have the Nazism example to teach people in the school very easily that democracy should have check and balances, and we should debate about what particular check and balances we should have. Because as first Prop told you, it's really very easy for every particular leader to get short-term benefits, to expropriate some property from minority, and majority will agree with it, because it's very good for majority to expropriate some property, give its benefits to majority, and majority do not understand the cost of it. And we should have this very strong moral example for them not to do it, because otherwise we cannot fight it, because it's really, in short term, very beneficial for people to restrict migration, because it's very good for you, for your children to have more jobs, or to have your culture be safe, or other stuff. It's really good for short term for people, and it's very easy for leaders to become authoritarian, because sometimes it's very easy to rule the economy on an authoritarian scale, not about the democracy, because too many opinions can harm you during the time of crisis. We believe that it could be effective, but we should have this idea taught in school to people, which is easy to understand for them, to understand that there should be check and balances. Whenever the system is effective, we should care about moral stuff, because it could really lead to such crucial cruel things, and that's why it's very easy to talk and have good consequences for us. And moving to the point about the international society, the problem here is the problem here is that we believe that maybe the Holocaust or other stuff will never be in Europe again, because we have very developed democracy, we have very rich countries or other stuff. But the problem is not the existence of the United Nations international law, which first Prop told, but the problem is that I, as a citizen of rich European country, should clearly understand why I should, give about 10% of GDP, which could be spent here, for the persons in other part of the world who are suffering, but I don't know, what are they suffering? And because I have the example of Holocaust, example of the Second World War and Nazism, there are big media sphere around it, and I could easily have, this image in my head and understood why I do such kind of stuff. I have this empathy. Empathy should be based, on your previous experience. When we had this previous experience of this, of the troubles in Europe, we are much more faster to react on the troubles in Rwanda. It's not. The second prop is not right when they told us, okay, in Rwanda we were wrong. The comparison is not correct. The comparison should be intervening in Rwanda in the first place, or not. We believe that in a world without Nazi memory, we will not intervene in the first place, or intervene much or intervene not so fast, because the Nazism is a very good example to refer to. When you refer to Nazism or other stuff, it makes people to press their government to do something faster, to not care only about their interest in terms of money or other stuff, but to give this money to United Nations, to give this money for army, not to deal only with the domestic problems. You deal with the domestic problems because you live here, your children will live here. But why should you care about genocide in Africa? Because you should clearly understand what the genocide is. And if we will not remember it, we will not give our money, and we will not have army to fight with it, we will not intervene in it, because we do not have such kind of sympathy to them, because we do not have this experience, because we don't remember about this experience. With this experience we remember it, we intervene, and we do such kind of stuff, and much more faster, because reference to Nazism produce very fast reaction in society, and we do it first.
So I understand your answer. In democracy, people can educate by the lesson of the Nazis, but when the country is in recession, when the whole country is losing faith towards democracy, how can you guarantee the political leaders from that country won't take Nazis?
They still will advocate to it, because as I explained, it's very beneficial in the short term for every majority in the society to oppress somebody to get some economical benefit. It's very beneficial for this leader to score easy points by giving people this result of this oppression of the minority to the majority. It will still be, even with example of Nazism or without example of Nazism. We also do not believe that Sunni and Shia argument is based on Nazism. No, it's based on religion stuff, and you still do not give us the criteria why it's connected to Nazism. No, it's in different ways, in different patterns. But we believe that similar pattern, which is moral counterweight to it, is everywhere is Nazism. It's a very easy stuff for us to educate people about it and to use it. So on this term that we should have these debates about democracy and other stuff, because we should have clear moral ground what we should be afraid. And the example of the second problem about NCA, no, we do not refer to the Holocaust when talking about NCA. We refer to the to the year 1934, where there also was democratic government with Hitler who also spied on these people, and it's clear comparison, normal comparison, without any big fact. We just bring one stuff from Nazism and explain why it's bad. So we do not understand the whole bench of the bad stuff which is connected with one stuff. And that's because it's the only way to produce sympathy to the people from the rich countries, to people in the poor countries, to give them money and other stuff, because it's a faster way to solve the problem in our world. We are very proud to oppose. Thank you.
I think the member of the opposition speech and conclude the one side of the government. I call upon the
Dear Mr. Speaker, I'll bring two questions in this cover speech. Firstly, whether we will create a better human rights discourse in our society if we raise this memory, and finally, what political system we will have, like in our model or in the model of opposition, or reputation will be integrated. First thing, what type of a human rights agenda will we have? Because of the whole point of the whole branch of a side of opposition, like, okay, just because of these atrocities was something like extreme, and they actually didn't bring to us analysis in comparison to other type of atrocities like genocide that appeared afterward, it was in the previous, why it was so extremely unique that if we learn these type of mistakes, we somehow will become different type of moral human beings. They didn't do this. But what is the problem here? We brought to us just firstly empirically. Firstly, all type of atrocity that was perpetrated by the Nazis, for instance, even concentration camp, that existed before the Second World War. First thing. Second, afterwards, specific type of crimes that exactly Nazis committed. What do we mean? Like killing people on the basis of their ethnicity, on the basis of their nationality. It was done in Darfur, it was done in Srebrenica, it was done in Rwanda, it was done in many other places. As it's such, just empirically we do not see any type of evidence. How is it possible if we afterwards, after embedding and decorating to the whole universe of this type of values, we stop this? No, we didn't stop. But what is the theoretical basis? Just because of closing opposition told us. But we create this system where sympathy, and afterwards will just attach this type of values towards helping others, thereby more likely that people go into help. First Prop responded on this already. They told to us, we live in a liberal discourse. If we live in a liberal discourse, what it teaches us, we have to respect human rights, thereby it's more or less sufficient for us. What we have told to us, to you, first thing we told to you, that you can just attach to not just one idea of a type of atrocity, but you're more likely to be attached to many type of atrocity that has happened all around the world. What it means? It means simply that they're actually much more sympathetic to the all other races, all other issues. It's not anymore just about Holocaust. What is the specific problem even within Nazis atrocities? We forget, for instance, about homosexuals. We forget, for instance, about gypsies. We are very focused about just Jewish agenda, Jewish Holocaust. It was really even at the basis of a speeches of opposition. But what is the problem? The problem that the current idea of Holocaust, all this stuff, is very politically based. It's used as a political tool just to justify the creation of an Israel state as it was claimed or by the opening. What it led to, what type of agenda? It led to the agenda that I can right now use this type of rhetoric in order to justify current atrocities, for instance, towards Palestinians. We find this very problematic. But what second claim was bring to us? If we continue the logic of our first position, and we claim that the human rights should be contingent not on the basis of atrocities, as it claimed by the opposition, but they should be attached just only to the value of me as human being, and only me as a human being, thereby we create much better political discourse, because I start to believe in the virtue of a human being irrelatively to any type of atrocities. It means simply I value human being not just because of Jews suffered or homosexuals suffered, just because of he has universal type of rights as me, just because of he has the same type of needs as me, just because of he is inspired to live as me, but not other way around. But when you start to believe in exactly this specificality, that Nazism is some kind of ideology upon what we have to attach human rights, you narrow this framework, thereby you have much worse political discourse, thereby you're much more likely to abuse human rights as such.
On a comparison, it's not very simple agenda which you're talking about, not very simple concept of human rights, but concept basing on Nazism, and that Nazism is bad, is very much more simple and easy understandable by majority of people.
Firstly, it's like, I will respond this in the second point. Okay, what type of political system would we have? So, like, first proposition told us, yes, it's some kind of a problem with some extremist parties that right now in kind of popularity, why? Just because of Nazism is unique in terms of Hitler, all this stuff, he's very charismatic. Moreover, we claim that Nazism is based not only on charismatic persons, but more a lot of type of symbols, a lot of films, all this type. Yes, we're more likely to believe in this type of ideology, that this type of ideology that was brought by opposition that told to us, anyway, we'll somehow find evil guys. No, you cannot, because of Nazism was extremely unique in the time when it appeared. It's impossible to have the same case like in 1933. It's impossible to have Mein Kampf, for instance. It's impossible to have, for instance, like movies of Leni Riefenstahl that is incredibly powerful to persuade you. If you erase this type of ideology, you're less likely to believe to all these politicians who currently appeal to the values of a Nazism as such. But more, what we claim for that? Just because they believe that somehow, if you point out that probably like some authoritarian leader as a Putin, he seems likely to be a Hitler, and afterwards we can stop him using this type of rhetoric. Firstly, we claim it's false, just because it seems to be like a trivialization of the problem itself, and people do not buy this simply. But moreover, if you trivialize this problem through this type of political discourse, you do not see real insights. You just start to believe that yes, it's some kind of just bad guy, but you do not see course, and you do not react. Probably you're less likely to couple with this problem. But what another claim was that, just because of how just war has been like finished by the Second World War, it was a victory over victories. What it means? It means that we used the following logic. That end justified means in order to achieve greater good. We combated like Nazism ideology, for instance in the case of Dresden, we just bombarded the whole city. Or for instance right now justify Stalin for Golodomor when 8 million people died, when we for instance right now justify Stalin for the whole atrocity towards Russian population. Why? Just because we propose that it's better to fight by any type of means against Nazism. What happens afterwards? Afterwards, you have a political system like for instance in Russia, that started to believe it's better to have a strong, strong hand that will rule the whole population in order to achieve greater good. If you have this type of a false premise from the very beginning, you're more likely to have exactly authoritarian type of a political system. But moreover, you're more likely to justify as in such harsh measures in order to achieve greater good. We still, but they claim to us like, okay, I'm also okay. So the whole point is, under our model, we have better political discourse. We'll attach human rights agenda, not to atrocities, but universal type of values. But moreover, we'll have more pluralistic political system, and moreover, will fight better with any type of dictatorship regime, just because we do not think that fighting against evil by any means is a good idea.
The government will reach and conclude the debates. I stop on that issue.
Okay, thank you for the floor. So first of all, just one point of rebuttal and just one moment. So we told us about the methods that politicians use in order to achieve something. But we understand that politicians are not so influential about this ideology, so they do not need, they think in different discourse, and that's why they do not choose methods only by this historical memory. So and now what I'm going to tell you in my summary speech. So we should answer that will the world be a better place without these members? And to answer this question, so first I will talk about this Nazi ideology according to the ordinary people and how they see it and how they think about it. And second of all, about our international problems that we still have now. So now to the first point. So we understand that. So the question is, do these members help one generation of people that support Nazi or racist ideology, as the government told us, rise, or as we told you as a second deposition, also these terrible examples of bad consequences that took place in the past, we can stop this movement. So, and first, what the first government said. So first they told us that the problem is that Hitler was a really good and powerful debater, and that because of some books and some films, people will follow him. But we understand that we now can prohibit some such materials, and so if the problem will only that people can read it, so let's prohibit them also. We don't think that this is the problem. But we believe as the second government that the reasons why Nazism rise again and racism view exists now are not just because of these books, not just because of these materials. And we explain you what are such things. For example, understand that people tend to divide all other people in different groups. They tend to care more about their own group, about ourselves. Or for example, a lot of people just do not like immigrants because they took their jobs. So we understand that there are a lot of structural problems that will always exist, and it's much, and a lot of politicians still use this rhetoric, as my partner told you, to achieve some results, and this may be very harmful. And that's why we understand that these views will always exist. But we understand that also, that despite of this, we should, the only method of how we should fight it is to show these people that believe in this some examples of really bad and terrible consequences. And as my colleague told, it's very important to show, to start showing and explaining to people why it's so bad to discriminate some minorities and some rights. We need to start to do in early ages, in childhood. That's why we teach what is bad and what is wrong children in school now, thank you. And we understand that the idea, as one told you, for example, that we should respect rights just because of rights is a very complicated idea, and that's why it's very difficult to explain to children why we should do it, because it's so difficult, and not people will understand it. That's why we need some absolute evil, some concentrated evil with a lot of victims, with such terrible consequences. We understand that it's much better to have no such kind of black and white example to explain to people what is right and what is wrong. That's why we need, and that's how we should work with such people that still believe in these ideas, to show showing, to telling them this to what bad consequences it can lead. And we understand that these people really follow their leaders because of some emotional rhetoric that their leaders use, because of some irrational feelings, for example. And that's why we need also some irrational stuff to explain to them also, because it's very difficult for them to have some discussion with rational arguments if they just believe that one group should be better, and that's why they can discriminate other groups. So the only way how we should deal with it, and as we explained as a second opposition, we should just explain their emotions also and show them these terrible consequences as we know. And that's why it's very important, and without it, it may lead to faster, as government told, maybe to rise again, to rebuild this ideology will take more time, but we cannot stop it because we won't know in your case the consequences of this. That's why we will have at the end more victims and more people will suffer about this ideology because we do not understand why is it so bad, and that's why they didn't use the victims and the life of people will be on our side. So. And now coming to, also, as my colleague told, it's very important in everyday life when you vote for politicians, for example, some political parties, to understand that it's not appropriate to discriminate some minorities, because we can pass the reference to some Nazi examples, and all people will understand that here are Nazi examples that are very bad, and not to explain much longer why is it so bad. But now to the second point. So do you think, if you agree, what do you think is better? Do you want others to treat you with sympathy because of your disadvantaged past, or do you want others to treat you completely as equal as any other race in this world?
Well, of course, we believe that it's better if all people understand that all people are equal, but to explain them, we should use this very emotional and short example of why is it so bad. So now to my second point about international topics. So we understand that we have a lot of problems, but first of all, we have still some institutions and we still punish some dictators and people that commit some crimes, for example. And also, we disagree with the second government that the problem is that people think that it can happen all majority. Because if we see something terrible happen, we always refer to the Nazi examples, and that's why people understand that it is so terrible. And now, why the constructors that my partner brought is so important, because when I think that Europe and the USA are the only powers that can act in the international area and can stop the genocide, for example, in other countries, because these countries are rich, they are powerful, more than army, for example. And we understand that the people only understand why is it so bad, why genocide is so bad to happen, because they have their historical past, their past experience that happened in these countries, and that's why they are so emotionally connected with the people, for example, in Rwanda. And we believe that without this memory, without these examples, they won't be connected. So they won't push the government to act faster, for example, or to act at all if they see something terrible is happening. Or they can have a person, for example, to give to charity or to volunteer. And we understand that without this empathy, they won't do it, because we have a lot of examples of a lot of wars, and Europe started intervening in some countries only after the war happened, and we understand that it's important to prevent evil not only in Europe, but to act in the whole world on the international area. And all this is